thinking reproduction, R-E-P, okay, stop. When we go upstairs, I will do it with you. But I did it already, and there are 0.0 sites. I have to pause and say that 0.0 is this thing my husband says, which I assumed because he went to a fancy college, that was some kind of nerd thing that I could never access. But it turns out it's from Animal House. It's Blutarski's grade point average. I promise you, honey, there are many sites on the internet that discuss cheetah reproduction. I say with great manufactured calm, trying a trick that involves pretending your child is not your child, but rather just a child. Any child, asking for your gentle guidance. Sometimes this works. Mom, there are no, stop, enough. Do not say one more word, we will do this later. After Georgia storms off, Edward says, when I first met you, you didn't drink coffee, and you were so mellow. How can I tell him I was a dog in show? High-stepping with my shiny hair and sparkly striped collar. 12 years and 2 puppies later, I'm an ungroomed bitch. And perhaps I'm not alone. Beneath my frustration is real fear. What if my kid lacks a handful of the critical life skills we're always reading about in the school newsletter? Persistence, coachability, curiosity. What if there's an iceberg hardening right now beneath this defeatism? I mean, if a kid can't find a single word online about cheetah propagation, what kind of future can she hope for? That's why I snap and storm around and then spend long nights thinking of the most damaged adults I know, and wondering if my particular brand of maternal screw-ups are how they ended up like that. My passionate engagement frees Edward from just about all worry. He sleeps fine. He talks to his friends about road bikes. Why should he fret about the girls when I'm pacing the sealant off the hardwood floors? It would be redundant. Recently, he called with good news. We were invited up to Tahoe for 4 days with the O'Sullivans. Our girls can ski with their girls, and we can have an adult day on the mountain. This was a flawed plan, or at the very least, a plan that required some consideration. 10 years into our marriage, I've learned to look back, to push back using fact, not feeling. I thought we were in a period of post-Christmas austerity. Didn't you say we needed to get our burn rate under control, build up the 529s, maybe pay down some of our mortgage? Kelly, the place is free. 4 days at SWA equals 16 lift tickets. I don't like being the family controller, but apparently it's a job that must be done. So we just not gonna ski, ever? The real problem with Freddie Fun's Tahoe plan was that the O'Sullivan girls skied 20 days last winter on double black diamonds. Our girls are what the savvy ski schools call advanced beginners. Which meant 2 things. Without a parent to slow her down, Claire would hop off a ski lift and fly in whatever direction the slope took her. Fly with her hands high and her skis tight together, fly until she met a tree, or another skier, or the cliff's edge. There was no helmet hard enough to protect her from her own recklessness. And Georgia, who does not like to be a beginner and will not ask for help, would ride to the top of the mountain with the very able Maggie O and go wherever she led, even the Olympic runs, crying behind her ill-fitting loaner goggles. Did Edward not know this? Could he not feel their insides clench like I could? How are they going to learn if we don't let them try? Edward wanted to know. I don't want them to grow up scared of mountains and rivers and whatever else makes you nervous. I want them to be gamers, be on the go team. Here I thought I married George Corrigan's daughter. Don't tell me I married, watch it. I'm not sure who Edward married. Maybe the person he married became a different person, because maybe that person is the right person for the job. Maybe that person will take on the cheetah report and protect over and underconfident children on ski slopes and manage the unsettling situations that often bubble up right around bedtime. I just have to pause and say that I've caught out of the corner of my eye that we have someone here doing sign language, and I wondered what the sign language was for Kegel. maybe we'll talk about that later too. One particularly tough night, I'd broken a wine glass while I was doing dishes, and Claire was still upset that I'd forgotten to take her down to the softball field that afternoon so she could be in the team picture. And my lower back ached, and let's just say the day was pleading to be done. Okay, girls, bedtime. I get to stay up longer, Georgia said. Why? Claire asked. Because I'm 2 years older. Not for long, Claire said. Forever, Georgia said. Too casually for a truth so cruel. Nuh-uh, someday I'll be 9. Right, but when you're 9, I'll be 11. I will always be older than you. Claire looked at me and then at her sister and then back at me. Surely this was not the case. She's right, honey. This was as bad as anything I'd had to tell her over the years, as bad as everything dies, even people you know. Older, always, and forever. Georgia, stop. She gets it, okay? You made your point. Why are you yelling at me? I'm not, I yelled. I wrangled them into their rooms. As I closed Georgia's door, I heard Claire crying. What's the matter? Are you mad at Georgia? Yes, I'm frustrating. The bickering makes me crazy, and I've talked to Georgia. What did you say? The same thing I always say, leave it alone, walk away. She broke into a sob. It's okay, Claire, I'm just saying. It's not that, she snapped, winding herself up in a way that racked me to watch. Claire, honey, what is it? I readied myself for a confession. When she finally spoke, her voice was very small. Do you love one of us more than you love the other? No, do you think I do? Yes, she spat out, the deepest possible betrayal in her voice. You think I love Georgia more than I love you? No. I think you love me more than you love Georgia. To her mind, this was the most unforgivable treason. This violated a fundamental maternal vow. Dropping off the girls the next morning, I looked for anyone I might be able to talk to about the night before. I ran into Beth and then Christy, but I didn't know how to launch into the story, and I felt strangely self-conscious about Claire's concern. Besides, every mother on campus had her own problems, so I turned back toward Mountain Avenue and dialed my mom. Hey, so Claire said the most disturbing thing last night. She said she thinks I love her more than I love Georgia. What am I supposed to do about that? Well, I'll tell you, she said. You do your damnedest to keep things even, Steven, and I mean everything. Presents, sleepovers, eye contact. Your brothers once fought over tube socks. I'd put them in their stockings, and GT ended up with an extra pair, and I swear to God, it almost ruined Christmas. It's gonna be a long 10 years. 10? I still keep lists. Loans, visits, babysitting, you never stop tracking that one. Lovey, my dad picked up the other phone. Hey, Greenie. Lovey, great to hear your voice. While he told me about playing golf last week with cousin Tommy and some other youngsters, I gnawed on the fact that in addition to helping the girls parse the world and all its awful truths, time only goes one way. Things end, affections wax and wane. I was the sole distributor of the strongest currency they would ever know, maternal love. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Eric Draper certainly had a front row view of a significant era in my family. Eric was the presidential photographer for all 8 years of my uncle's leadership. He was there with my uncle during the attacks on our nation on 9/11. He joined my uncle and my Aunt Laura on numerous diplomatic trips abroad, and he also captured many private moments during his leadership. Eric was named Special Assistant to the President and was the first White House photographer to be named a commission officer to a U.S. president. He has also directed the archival conversion of the White House photo office from film to digital. In his amazing book, Front Row Seat, a photographic portrait of the presidency of George W. Bush, He reveals both the public and the private side of our 43rd President of the United States. Please welcome my good friend, Eric Draper.
Thank you, George P. It's an honor to be a part of this team to help celebrate literacy, and it was an honor to be the White House photographer for 8 years in the White House, serving President George W. Bush. In the spring of 1999, I was an Associated Press photographer, and I was handed an assignment to cover Governor of Texas, George W. Bush, who was about to announce his candidacy for the presidency of the United States. And little did I know, I was taking my first step on the road to the White House. And after the campaign, I thought to myself, the White House chief photographer, could I do that job? Could a black kid from South Central Los Angeles be the photographer to the President of the United States? The answer is yes. And then I saw my window of opportunity to ask for the job. After the recount was resolved, President Bush invited staff, myself, my wife, and journalists who traveled on the campaign trail to Austin, Texas, to the governor's mansion. And this was my chance to make a direct pitch for the job. So what I decided to do was take a page out of the president's campaign playbook. What I did was, he would always say, he told voters, I'm going to look you in the eye and ask you for the job. I want to be your president. Well, that's what I did. And at the party, with my wife, Carly, coaching me on the sidelines, when to make my move at the party, and I walked up to President-elect Bush and I said, thank you for inviting us to the party. By the way, I want to be your personal photographer. And I didn't blink. And by the way, that was the longest handshake in my life. And he looked at me and he looked away and he said, I really appreciate that, I'll get back to you. My life, already extraordinary in my opinion, was about to become remarkable. By the way, I'm the person third from the left, in case, just in case you don't recognize me. This photo was taken in 2006, kind of a younger, thinner version of me. I had incredible access during my job. And let's go back to the very first day. This is President Bush sitting down at the Resolute desk for the very first time as president. And what I love about this photo, you have a couple of layers to it. You have the personal moment, the proud father with his son. You also have the history of two presidents together, only the second son of a president to become president, the first being John Q. Adams. And then there's always the story behind the story. So you see that cord coming out of the wall to the chair? Well, that's a massage chair. And President Bush is turning it on at this moment, and that's what's leading to the laughter at this moment. By the way, that chair was gone the next morning. My office was the old barber shop in the basement of the West Wing, which was actually under the Oval Office. My desk sat in front of the original mirror that was still there, and I could be in the Oval Office in less than 12 seconds flat, and I actually timed it one day. And of course, location is everything. I just love my job. I like to call this photo, timing is everything. And as we all know, President Bush was very timely. He usually started his meetings on time or early, typically early. Okay, so this is not an example of the relationship between the President and Mrs. Bush. Don't get me in trouble. This is the President and Mrs. Bush inside Buckingham Palace, and they were guests of the Queen. And they were like kids that night. I mean, they were walking around the palace, and they're telling me, take our picture over here, and you know, they were just having a great time, just being people. And so 2 years later, the President and Mrs. Bush returned the favor and hosted the Queen at the White House. And this was an example of a moment for me where I got a little too close to the action. After the South Lawn arrival, the Queen and Prince Philip walked to the residence, and the President and Mrs. Bush gave them a tour. Toured the Lincoln bedroom and walked them into the Queen's room. And I didn't want to miss a thing, so I was like right behind the Queen. Well, what I didn't realize was the Queen was on her way to the restroom. So there we are. I'm standing in the restroom with the Queen, and once I realized it, in my embarrassment, I did an about face, and there was Prince Philip standing right in front of me, and he said with a straight face, "Are you following them to the loo?" And luckily, we both burst out in laughter, and I didn't create an international incident. This is more like the example of the relationship between the President and Mrs. Bush. This is a tender moment aboard Air Force One. Again, the President and Mrs. Bush allowed me to have incredible access during my 8 years. This is a powerful moment inside the Oval Office with the Martin Luther King family. The daughter in the center there asked the President if he would pray with the family, and the President said, of course. And that's the late Coretta Scott King on the left, who's holding the plans for the memorial, the MLK Memorial. This is in, I believe, 2003 when this moment happened. President Bush liked to have fun. I mean, he kept the staff laughing at all times. He didn't take himself too seriously. He took the job of president very seriously. And at this moment, a box shows up 7 o'clock in the morning on the Oval Office desk, and out of the box, he pulls out this full boxing robe. And so he's trying it on, and he's looking for someone to show it off to at this moment. This is a portrait of father and son. One of the things I learned pretty quickly is when you're around both presidents and you say, "Mr. President," they both turn around. So referring to them as President 41 and President 43 always helps. Did you know there was a presidential chainsaw? There it is. I loved the ranch in Crawford, Texas, and to document the president as a Texan. I really enjoyed those moments, and when people ask me what I enjoyed the most, well, actually it was Air Force One, but I really loved the ranch, to get out of Washington, to get out of a suit. This is the president driving a pickup truck, the only place where he can drive his own truck, actually. And people ask me, what's my favorite image in the book? And I think this is my favorite picture. This is more of a portrait, the president wearing the iconic cowboy hat, a little twinkle in his eye. And what you can't see is Barney, his dog at the time, we miss Barney, is sitting on his lap while he's driving. And when I always look at this photo, the timing is really interesting. This is August of 2001, a month before 9/11, a month before the world changed. I could prepare for a lot of things, but nothing could prepare me for September 11, 2001. I was with President Bush at the school in Sarasota, Florida that morning. This image captures the first moments after the president left the classroom, after the famous whisper in the ear from Andy Card that America is under attack. And I remember following the president out of the classroom and into this hold room, and just being stunned by the images, the live TV images of the burning towers. And I was just kind of like in shock, just standing there, realizing what was really happening. But the president was so focused on his words. He picked up a notepad that you see there and started to gather his thoughts, his words, for his first statement to the nation and to the world. And by the way, that piece of paper is on display at the Bush Library. Three days later, the president visited Ground Zero. I'll never forget being aboard the presidential helicopter, Marine One, as we approached Manhattan that morning. Smoke filled the cabin, and you can smell the smoke from the rubble. On the ground, it was a disaster zone. You can still feel the heat from the fire. The president greeted hundreds of firefighters, hugging, shaking hands. You can see that the firefighters were tired, they were exhausted, but they're also angry. No survivors were being found at that stage, and it felt like we were standing on a raw nerve. I heard one firefighter tell the president, "Go get him, George." And you can tell that the firefighters were looking to the president for leadership. You can feel the moment building, and the president delivered. With bullhorn in hand, the president lifted the spirits of the firefighters and the nation when he said, "I can hear you, the rest of the world hears you, and the people who knock these buildings down will hear from all of us soon." This is a tender moment at Walter Reed Hospital. The president had just given this injured soldier the Purple Heart, and he bent over to kiss his forehead. This is one of the untold stories. The president did dozens of visits to the military hospitals to visit injured troops in private, and there are a lot of tender moments during those visits. The 43rd president leaves the Oval Office for the very last time. There is nothing dramatic about this moment. It was very simple. It was about 8 o'clock that morning. The president asked for his coat. He walked out the door without looking back. The president didn't change. He was the same man I met nearly a decade earlier, a man full of focus and determination. It was obvious he had changed physically, but inside he carried the same beliefs and principles that he brought to Washington. And on board the airplane, it wasn't Air Force One anymore, it was basically a nonstop party with families and friends as we left Washington. This is January 20th, 2009, flying with families and friends, and of course, Mother. And the burden of the presidency, you can see on his face, had been lifted immediately. And this is a tender moment with his mother. On a personal note, I have to say, not only did I have the privilege of working for a great president, but I had the privilege of working for a great man with great values. He had a great impact on my life and character. Thank you.
Emily Giffen has been called a modern-day Jane Austen because of her beautifully written stories of romance and life with endearingly flawed but oh-so-human characters. She is currently one of the top-selling female fiction writers. Emily's books have been so popular that 5 of her books have been optioned for movies, starting in 2011 with her breakthrough novel, Something Borrowed. Her most recent novel, The One and Only, flew to the top of the New York Times bestsellers list as soon as it was released. The book is a beautiful story about love and loyalty, centering around football in a small Texas town. I know we can all relate to that. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Emily Giffen.
Thank you for the introduction, Mandy. Before I get started, I would love to thank the Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy, as well as Laura Bush, who she told us we could call her Aunt Laura at the luncheon today, and I'm going to do that for the rest of my life, Aunt Laura. And of course, George and Mandy Bush for hosting this beautiful event. I'd also like to thank Empower for the behind-the-scenes